Well, welcome in. This is a very, very special video podcast episode that we're doing with the one and only Daniella Ponticelli. I'm sure you recognize her. And the reason for this, of course, is that we are a couple of days away from the second Battle on Bay Street.
Yes, we are.
How excited are you for this, Daniella?
I am so excited because it's also New York's first visit to Toronto this season. So it's extra juicy, and the fact that New York has had quite a start to the season, and Toronto a little bit different from their year last year. So this is going to be a big matchup for a number of reasons. I know we're going to dive into it, but not the least of which is the energy that I know is going to be inside Scotiabank. The ticket sales look great. I took a little peek online, so I think we're in.
Out or no? Not quite.
Not quite. There's still some seats available, which is good news. So if you want to go, please, take a look online. There's likely still some tickets, but overall, it looks great.
Yeah, it's so it's a matter of days, and we wanted to reflect back because you did the first one, the first Battle on Bay Street, which was Toronto and Montreal last year.
I actually didn't, but I have a very fascinating story about that day. I didn't. So I was doing a game. It's okay, see. I was doing a game the very next day in Ottawa, and I remember going, I cannot miss an opportunity to witness history, because at that point, of course, we knew it was going to be the biggest crowd yet, because this was prior to the Bell Center game. And so my flight was at this time, I pushed it as late as I could, and I managed to get in the first two periods at Scotiabank. I made sure, I need to be there to witness this puck drop. I need to be there to witness just the energy. Now, of course, as we know, the goals were scored in the third period. However, I loved it because as soon as I got to my vehicle to get myself to the airport, I had the game on the radio, and I got to listen to Kenzie and Cheryl call the goals as they came, and it was great. I have chills still thinking about it. So didn't get to call it last year. Very honored to call it this year, though.
Yes, I apologize for that.
You're
yes,
okay.
I should remember. And that's so funny because, it was not only a big event, it was a really good game last year.
So
it was
fun.
0-0 and tension. I think
the tension. You just knew whoever was going to get that first goal. I know it sounds like cliche, and of course now we know whoever did get the first goal got the game winner. But you did feel that way. You felt like whoever was going to break through was going to win the game.
Yeah, and it turned out to be Jessie Comfer who got the first goal, which I believe was her first goal of the season, and I'll have to look up if she got another one.
First career goal. So, what an electric atmosphere to get your first goal. And then I remember Hannah Miller scored the second, and it was her birthday. So there's lots of great storylines and pieces to that game, too. It was really special.
Yeah. So it was another, Toronto over Montreal victory. And that storyline has flipped a little bit. But this year it's New York that's in town, as you mentioned, and plenty of storylines with that rivalry at this point.
Well, last season you think, okay, so New York comes in, it's the inaugural game. In fact, I got to show off my shirt. This is the game one, day one shirt, New York, Toronto. I love this shirt.
That one you did call.
Yes,
I know that.
So it's very special. So this rivalry in some ways is like a little extra special just personally. But they come in, and it was a shutout win, of course. So you're setting history. You're making history. It's the first game ever, first win. It goes to New York, and it happens to be a shutout. So Schroeder gets her first career shutout in the very first game. Okay. There's all these storylines. And then Toronto goes and spoils New York's home opener the very next game. And so that gives... So both these franchises, their first wins were against each other. There was extra history made. Campbell's first ever shutout was against New York, and it was the game that kicked off the 11-game win streak. So who knows what kind of magic's in the air on Saturday. But those are the sort of stories that I really gravitate to. It's just like, okay, the sort of bigger pictures and the amount of history that's been made between these two. Now, I don't know, for people who love goals, the history that they made in their last game. The first regular season game to be scoreless going into overtime. Now, it did happen twice in playoffs, once to Toronto and then in the other series as well, and that ended in double overtime. I remember calling one of those games, and it's a different kind of game when you don't have a goal to call, and you know that, okay, whoever scores this next goal, this is it. There's only going to be one goal, and that's it. Yeah, exactly. You can feel everyone's just on edge just a little bit more.
Yeah. So New York defeated Toronto 4-2 in their home opener at the Prudential Center, and then that 1-0 game that to me adds just that extra layer of spice now that Toronto is probably got a little chip on their shoulder.
You have to think so, right? And we know now, we've looked back, it was offside. But it is what it is. It was a goal. Jessie Eldridge from Barrie, Ontario, so she gets a nice homecoming. She scored it, and it was... The thing is, it was a beautiful goal. So it is one of those things where you're like, my goodness, if everything could have just aligned. But the point is, this is adversity. And this is where you're going to see teams, I believe, teams who have the mettle to go through a championship run. These moments in the regular season are galvanizing, can be. So we'll see how things play out. And Toronto has a climb ahead of itself if it wants to be in the top 4 conversation. There's still a bit of time this year, a bit more runway with the 6 extra games for each team. But you have to remember, it's still a short season. It's still only 30 games.
Yeah, those 3 points, one way or the other, it's just another element that makes the league so exciting that in the NHL, if you're X number of points behind, you've got to count on some help. In this league, if you go on a little win streak for 4 or 5 games, you can shoot right up to the top.
And also who you happen to keep off the
0
exactly points. If you can hold some certain teams to no points in a matchup, that is just as huge. And right now, this is kind of the time where if Toronto can make a play, we're recording this right before the Toronto-Boston game. If they get ahead of Boston out of this game, then all of a sudden you're not that far back off of New York, which is now in 4th, given Ottawa's big win Tuesday night. So this is the game we play. This is what I love about this league, and I particularly enjoyed last season, that stretch actually just after the World Championship, because then it was like, okay, all eyes on the standings. There's no looking back now. You've just got to forge ahead and get as many wins as you can to see who will battle it out at the top.
Yeah, and last season, last season the run to the finish, as you said, had twists and turns right up to the last second.
The very
last goal,
I know.
Boston squeaks in, Minnesota's floundering, Ottawa doesn't make it.
It was, exactly, you just bring me right back to that moment. And I remember the very last game of the season, Ottawa-Toronto, had implications in what was going to happen. And you can't script anything better than that, obviously, from a league perspective. You want to have competition all the way through. And then we also saw New York, a team that had just couldn't figure out a way to win games in certain situations, had tons of star power who we're now seeing tap into that potential. But what I loved about their story is as soon as it was, okay, now you're working for draft order points, they had a great end to their season. They really put, their foot on the gas, and they didn't let up. They said, okay, fine, we're not in this playoff conversation, but we're sure as heck going to go fight for Fillier. We're going to get these draft order points. And they genuinely, it all worked out in the end. They were the last place team. However, they also did earn their first draft pick.
Yeah, and let's talk about her for a second. And the rise. I was drawing parallels to last season with Toronto's start, with Ottawa kind of losing some 1-goal games. Montreal, Minnesota are at the top of the standings, kind of similar.
Very similar.
But I think the one thing that's quite different is New York and, of course, Fillier and the chemistry with Carpenter.
I mean, isn't this exactly what you want when you go into a draft? And New York made so many changes. There was also the head coaching change. So you've got a new leader in that regard, and you're bringing in this new star power who is going to be great for you, but you still have to build that chemistry, because how many amazing players are in this league who didn't really get going on the stats sheet, right? So you have to think, okay, she's going to be a rookie. We know there's going to be that jump potentially. You have to be ready, just like every other league knows. You go from NCAA up into the pros. And it feels like Fillier is calm, cool, collected. She's like, it's all right. I'm just going to play my game. And that is the most inspiring piece to this, has just been her comfort level in just playing her game. And of course, the highlights between these three, Carpenter as well, Eldridge, and so many others. It's just that chemistry is there, and it's undeniable. I mean, the thing is, Carpenter was also a phenomenal leader on this in points and in all of that. Her face-off ability, her composure. One thing that I find so, I'm going to say inspiring again, I love the fact Alex Carpenter has not yet ever had a penalty in this league.
Really?
She didn't get a single penalty last year, and she still hasn't gotten one this year. So talk about a leader, because when you're that skilled, right?
Yeah, you'd think you're mixing it up a little bit.
Or maybe you don't need to, because you are so confident on the puck that you don't need to go in there. Yeah, you're just so skilled, and she is. She's incredibly skilled. If you want to look at a technical player, I mean, Alex Carpenter is... I could watch her play all day. I could watch all of these women play all day. So I'm not just trying to heap the love on Alex Carpenter. It's all in the details. But I think that is... So you've got someone who's not a liability when she's out on the ice. She's not going to cause any problems that's going to cost you. And then you end up being a team that is really... you're firing on all cylinders because you have your firepower out on the ice.
Yeah, I mean... Well done to them. They drafted really well. We said so at the time, and it's played out with, sneaky good pick of Maya Nyland Pearson on the back end. I love Nora Toulouse. I knew she was going to fit seamlessly. She's a little bit older than some of the NCAA rookies. She's fit in well. It just, I think the coaching change and you add Fillier, and it gave Carpenter just those extra jet boosters. And
the truth is, you'll never know until you have all the pieces together and you go with it, because there is just some great talent, and the European talent is absolutely shining this season, which is also great to see. So there's a lot of great improvements we're seeing all around this season, and I think some of that just comes from comfortability, right? From knowing what a season in the PWHL is like, from the people who've been here. And for all those that are new, they get to learn from that too. They get to work with women who've now, okay, we've done it. It was shortened season, but we have done it. We know what it's like. We know what the grind is like. We know what it's like being out on the road. And we're still seeing some new elements come into play. Like I think of Boston's 6-game road trip, right? Even though one of them was a home game because it was on neutral ice. Yeah. But the point is that there's still a lot of new challenges that teams are coming together and experiencing. So it'll be another incredible learning experience for everybody.
Yeah. And from the Toronto side of things, we know that they've struggled a little bit, but literally we've gotten some great news with Megan Carter and Natalie Spooner both joining full practice.
Yes.
Without those no contact jerseys, they were full participants. I think Carter's a little closer than Spooner, but that'll be a welcome for them. And
absolutely, because we think of what a difference all the draft picks have made. Well, Megan Carter has not been in the mix for Toronto.
Yeah, she's
so that's
second round draft
exactly pick. So you're talking at a high draft pick who just hasn't been able to show what she can bring. I'm very excited for her to get on the ice. And I feel like there might be quite a bit of pressure on Natalie Spooner at this point, because you're looking at a team, okay, well, they're not quite finding that same groove and success that they did last year. But, I mean, she's smart enough. I don't think that she's going to shoulder that too much, and she shouldn't, because the truth is she's got to come out and play her game. And also, we all have to remember that this is someone coming back from quite a long break. So... yeah, it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Of course, she is a professional. All these women are, and they know the expectation to come out and perform.
Hey, sorry for the interruption. It's me interrupting, probably me. Just to say, we are brought to you by you. This is a 100% listener-supported podcast, and that means that we rely on you and your contributions, and it is so appreciated. There are a few ways you can do that. It's either with a super thanks on YouTube, or just directly going to our PayPal link, which is gamedayhockey1@gmail.com, and you can just directly send us a few dollars if you're enjoying the podcast and the content that we're giving you here. It means the world to us, and we're not going to interrupt you with any ads, just ourselves, and we're all in this together. It really keeps us going, so thanks for your support. When a superstar leaves the lineup, sometimes the rest of the team, it shuffles parts and it elevates some people, but they learn some things like, maybe I can step into this a little bit more.
Absolutely.
Then when the superstar returns, you've kind of got a little more confidence here and there. I think they're well coached enough that they're not going to be like, oh, Spooner's back, let's just sit back and let her do her thing, right?
Yeah, you the hope would be, of course, that whenever someone is returning, you simply elevate, that there isn't, that, okay, everything that we've built a foundation around can continue. I mean, one thing I look at just from my own viewpoint is the constant changing of lines, that can certainly be a benefit in a situation like this because, okay, now you've got all these players who are so used to playing with one another in different ways. And Troy Ryan has said to me, and I'm sure he shared this with other people, that he doesn't believe that a line belongs to anybody. And I know that there's a number of coaches that believe in that philosophy of like, this line isn't your line, this is this line and you're working in this rotation. And that mindset can be very helpful in situations like that when you do bring back your star forward from year one.
It'll be interesting to see where they do place her. She played with both Blair Turnbull and Sarah Nurse last year.
And there were times she played with Emma Malte.
Yes,
so
they had chemistry.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. They connected for a number of goals.
Yeah, they might. I mean, first and foremost is her health. Of course, that's a major injury, and she's on the early side of things, but we still are looking forward to see what she's going to bring. So I'm assuming, I don't know for sure about Carter, but I'm assuming that either one will be playing in this.
We just don't know at this juncture. Yeah, exactly.
True enough. We'll see. But
we do know that it's a big game, and it's a game that Troy Ryan is really looking at as, okay, let's try to up the stakes of this game. I know you had a great conversation with him in that regard.
No, you can go ahead and share that.
Oh, okay. Well, it's also because, that's a conversation that myself, Becky, and him had a lot last season too, is he looks at a season and he breaks it down. Okay, these next 5 games is a series. It doesn't have to be against the same opponent, right? It could be against the 5 other teams in the league. But the idea is to simulate it because, as most fans of women's hockey know, series weren't really a thing, at least on this grand a scale, where it's a 5-game series, and then another one right away. And potentially down the line, as expansion happens, we could see even more games, right? And then the playoff structure. So we'll see how that goes. But the point is that he tried to do it this way so that you're building towards something. Okay, so we lost last night. What do we do now to win again so that we can win this series? And from my understanding, you had a conversation with him, and he's looking at this battle on Bay Street as almost like a game 5 of the Walter Cup, not even just any series. So that's kind of the mindset that you're trying to replicate, which has got to be hard because you're not in a
the other team
series.
Isn't in on it either, but within the dressing room you want to say, like, we're tied 2-2 and this is it. And
yes.
So, that the fans are fired up and to emulate that atmosphere and to put a little bit of pressure and see how they perform.
To close it out. How do you close this game out? How do you seal the deal? Hopefully not leave it to overtime. Although now in this regular season situation, if you're the team that's trailing, you just want to push. You need those points, right? Those points are so key. And especially for a team like Toronto, which last season it worked in their favor. They never lost an extra time game. They also didn't have as many. They closed a lot of their games out in regulation. They had the most regulation wins, fewest regulation losses from what I understand. So they were really efficient in that way and really effective in that way, getting those 3 points. So now it's a little bit different. You got to shift your mentality of looking at, okay, if the situation arises that we're in this extra time game, or that we could push it to overtime, how do we do it?
And then in that extra 1 point, things finished so tightly last year that at 1 point can literally get you in the playoffs. And
keeping that other team from getting a full 3 because, I think that was one of the biggest differences with Montreal last season, finishing second, was they had incredible games. And there was a huge stretch, where they were just going back to back. So a loss, a win, a loss, a win, a loss, a win. Like they didn't ever really pull together huge streaks, and especially when it came to losses, they were very effective at not doubling up on losses last season, which worked out great. However, a lot of that meant going into overtime, right? So not getting that either the full 3 or even 2.
It's just so tight. Every game you need to watch right through to the third period and perhaps beyond,
and that's what happens in a 6-team league as well, right? Where the parity is there, which is what makes it really exciting. But it is going to lead to goaltending duels and battles. And congratulations to Gwyneth Phillips on her, first career shutout.
First win and first shutout. Yeah, that was wonderful to see. And Northeastern won the Bean Pot as well. So
look at that.
Some full circle there. I want to let's talk about you and your season for a minute, because you did the first game. I mean, you've been there for the whole thing, so you have
So fun. I love
really
it.
good perspective on maybe how this season compares to last. Like, what are you seeing?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm solely speaking from my experience, and what I was excited for and what has totally come through in year 2 is having the year 1, is having a comparison or something to build upon with those storylines. As I just mentioned, so New York didn't fare well against Toronto last season. Now we've got this whole new discussion of, hey, they've got 2 wins. They went on Saturday. They have their season series locked up. 3 to whatever, even if Toronto can win the latter 2. So it is one of those things where you start to go, okay, this is a very different conversation. I love that we can compare. I also love that we're still seeing so much new, and we're seeing improvement on the players as well, and the growth from people who I'm gonna look at Hillary Knight, for example, who's having a great start this season, and I think that was almost a little bit of the expectation from last season, and it didn't quite work out. But that's also because there's new teams, and everybody was kind of feeling their way through things. So just overall, year 2 has been really exciting in that capacity, to see the individual growth, to see how team identities have formed. I don't know about you, but I feel like the team names have been around forever now. I can't not think of the Sceptres being the Sceptres or the Fleet being the Fleet. So that was also exciting, right? Is coming into year 2 with the names, with the ability to play off of those names and really kind of create an identity around it. Selfishly, from a broadcast perspective, I love our broadcast packages, our graphics, all of the elements that have really come together. And hey, I'm here for the rule innovations all the time. So year 2, the no escape rule, bring it on. I mean, what a way. Interesting is a great word, because there are times when you love it and you hate it, and there's all these things in between. But the point was to bring up power play scoring, and we are seeing that. And I know the league is trying as well to monitor, okay, well, how do we determine if it was actually a direct result of the no escape rule? And really, you're going to have to look at when those goals are scored within the power play,
in that
right?
first shift, and
ideally, yeah.
Even then, you might end up. I think we've seen a couple of times where it's like, oh, well, those are kind of their penalty killers anyway, so a team might get lucky. But
it's incredible. It's
really,
incredible
really
as well when you think of, okay, so even if perhaps they're able to get the change right, are they so fixated on the change that then it still creates an opportunity for the other team on the team on the power play? So even that dynamic is something you have to think about, right? Like, it's not just a matter of getting people out. And I think teams are figuring it out now pretty well. But we're going to have a whole league of very skilled players who can now positions that they maybe would have never gotten time for, right? So I think overall it's really gonna make players just stronger and hopefully more confident in their abilities when they go, okay, it's us 4 against the world right now, and it could be a situation where it's 3 minutes to the end of a playoff game and this is it, right? So it's a really fascinating dynamic, but I've always appreciated that this league doesn't shy away from innovation. I found myself at an NHL game last week going, gosh, I wish we had the jailbreak.
Yes.
Wish we had the jailbreak.
Yeah, like a shorthanded goal is just like, well, that's great, but the player doesn't get out of the box. And
anyway, I could talk forever about it, but for me personally, year 2 has had those advantages in that aspect, and we're still seeing we're still seeing firsts, milestones. I think of Dominique Petrie and the fact that she scored a goal in her first 3 games. Like, all of those things, it matters, and it's enriching the history of this league.
Yeah, and some first goals for players that did play last year. I'm thinking of Peyton Levis and a couple others that, you knew they had it in them, and it's got to feel good that they're like, I know I'm a goal scorer and I can do that. We've already talked about some of the individual performances, Philly and Carpenter, and you mentioned Hillary Knight, a couple other names that I've written down, but I'll let you think before I throw these names out.
Well, Claire Thompson.
Okay.
We've got to talk about Claire Thompson in Minnesota and just her. I mean, we expected good things. And she is just like, here you go. Here are all the good things for you to enjoy.
A little bit like Philly.
Yes.
She's been there, kind of didn't have quite as rough a transition, let's say. Just stepped right in.
I do think it's interesting because I hear a lot of chatter about these players, and they'll be like, well, she's not really a rookie. And I'm like, fair enough, but in this league, you still are. And you have to give credit where it's due. This is a player who hasn't played in this league, who came in and not only found herself very securely, but has absolutely contributed to her team's success right away. And I think I really hope nobody takes that away from someone just because, oh, well, they have a lot of, sure. But we also know, and we've also seen that the international experience does not necessarily translate directly to that.
And she didn't play all of last year, don't forget. So,
yeah, she was
had to kind of
hard at work doing her medical degree, right? So, yes, really great points. And I know you also want to talk about her because I'm excited to talk about her, but Abby Borin, you know why? See, I think back, I don't know, do you remember draft day?
Yes.
Okay, so what was your interpretation of Abby Borin's reaction? I mean, let's be frank, I don't know how she felt.
Yeah.
It didn't seem in the moment like she's shocked. And why not? She helped Minnesota get to that Walter Cup. She played in the semifinal round against Toronto. And all of a sudden she's like, wait, this place that I've known and loved and where I've really grown as a hockey player, now I'm completely going somewhere else. But what I love about it is that she has embraced Montreal to the nth degree, and she is shining for them, and it's always a little bit satisfying when a player from a team comes back to play their team and they score a goal. I mean, that's just a fun thing. Doesn't matter who you are, even when it's like against a team that I would cheer for. And I don't have favorites in the PW. I genuinely love all these teams so much, which makes it a lot of fun because I get to cheer for everybody. But I'm thinking like NHL stuff, and you're like, gosh darn it, he got that goal against against his former team. But I remember back to last season, and Ken Klee, like we talked, I think it was the second time Abby Borin got picked up again from the reserve, right? And he went, my gosh, if there was a way we could figure out in this season, he's talking about last season, to just sign her for the rest of the year, like that'd be great. I mean, she's just so awesome. Like he had nothing but love and praise for this player, and he fully understood her potential and what she can bring. So that's got to hurt a little bit. It's got to hurt a little bit when you see.
Yes, but they drafted Klara Himlarova in the third round, and I know there was a little bit of a murmur that went through the crowd because it kind of seemed like that was the exact spot that Borin was going to, ought to go. And so it was like third round, and then Montreal took their time out, and they stepped up, and Marie-Philippe Poulin herself said Abby Borin, and there's just sort of this like, isn't she in,
but I think that's
pharmaceutical school? Wait a minute.
What I love about it, though, is it's a reminder that this is a business, and people are absolutely going to go after the best players available, the players who are going to help their team. By the way, I love Poulin's nickname for Abby Borin, Bobo.
Oh,
yeah, that's what she. I've heard it in the videos. It's great. Like she was mic'd up, and she, when Borin scored, you called her Bobo. I'm like, that is the best nickname ever. It's so French and so wonderful.
Yeah,
but
she's fit in seamlessly.
But I think it's important that we recognize now, as much as we ought, like. Clearly, there has to be some, like, okay, let's try to figure out the best situation for people. You're a phenomenal player. And the Victoire are looking at you going, we don't want Minnesota to have you. We want you. Come over here. We'll figure it out. And whatever their play was, it worked out for them. I mean, signed her to a 3-year deal. And, I just think it was a great reminder that this isn't, we're not necessarily going to play nice. This is a draft. We're here.
Yeah, it's an international league. Yeah. It's not a hometown team. Yep. Danielle Sauvageau is just sort of a careful, quiet genius, pulling the strings and making the right moves. And that was a great move that's worked out. And then there's another American player. I'll just say who it is. Kendall Kocur.
Yes.
I believe she's tied for the league lead in scoring at this point, which is not surprising. But
another player, though, who, is really showcasing her strengths this season, and she was incredible last year, too. It's just perhaps it didn't always translate into the stats. And it's important to know, like, when you're a leader on a team like that, it isn't just about the goals you score. It's about how you can lead your team in those undefined ways as well.
Let's circle back then to this upcoming game, and just from your point of view as a broadcaster, like you're in a big environment. I don't know what the media booth looks like, but is it intimidating for you to be like, in a big arena like that?
Oh no, I love it. The reason I say oh no is because you have so many more resources when you're in a space like that. You have more space physically, you have more space. You have more tools at your disposal. So I called the 3-on-3 PWHL showcase last year from Scotiabank, and that was my first time being in that booth. But there's monitors all over, and obviously you have a great view of the ice. I did call the Bell Center game, and that view of the ice is spectacular. I can't, because you're basically floating in the Bell Center. It's the press box is kind of a floating space. It's not like attached directly to the roof type thing. You're not in the rafters. You're actually slightly lower, and there's actually fans kind of up and back behind you. You're not blocking anyone's view. It's just a beautiful building, really well constructed. But Scotiabank it's amazing. It's an amazing building. So, and you get, like I said, you just get spoiled with your view of the ice. I personally, though, love all the views of the ice in this league. Calling from Place Belle, for example, is another great setup. Coca-Cola Coliseum, you feel like you're right there, right? That's such a great feeling. Not quite as close as Mattamy. Mattamy was very close.
Yeah.
And Verdun, too. I think of Verdun was... Verdun, I'm so glad I was able to call a few games there because it's such a magical place. But if you are even a little bit claustrophobic, the press booth might not be your best friend because you are right up against, like, there's a wall, and then you're right there. Like, there's no real room to move. Not that I have to necessarily be turning, but you've got to put cameras in there, so it was very sharp angles. Kudos to the crew, Dome Productions, that always make it work, no matter what situation you're in. Make it look great. So, I just think overall those buildings are great. And I did get to call it Xcel Energy Center too because of the playoffs.
Right. Okay.
So that was really amazing. So when you have the opportunity to work in these facilities that you wouldn't typically get to work in, it's just another great reminder of what's out there, and I love it. I think it's great.
I'm glad you said that because I do think Mattamy and Verdun, they'll go down in history.
Yeah.
They were sort of like starter arenas, but very unique atmospheres, but hopefully bigger and bigger as we go along. So that's interesting to hear about Scotiabank.
It feels a little. It's like, wow, that actually happened. All those sold out games in those smaller spaces that were, it's just like such a great atmosphere.
So I'm curious about the behind the scenes when you're calling a game. Like, I know there's so many things going on. You've got notes, you've got monitors, you've got someone in your ear. Mm-hmm. Are you also able to just take in the game and be like you can't say out loud, like, wow, but, as the
there's times when I've said, wow. Some of those Mashmeyer saves, I mean, come on. You're just like, whoa. It's interesting you mentioned that, though, because there is a delicate balance of, like when I talk to different mentors, and I'm fortunate enough to have a number of mentors in this space, some of them are very much like, hey, don't forget to react to the thing that you saw, because sometimes if you get too much in your own head about calling action, you kind of forget the emotion and the feeling of that. But you also can't let that take over because you have to stay in it enough to keep up with what's going on. This year especially, I made it my goal to just take it all in, right? And I tried to do that as much as I could last year, especially, like, for example, with the Bell Center game. I got there really early with Becky, and we just sort of looked around a little bit in silence for a bit, going, this is incredible. This is an incredible moment, and it's incredible for the players. Like, I always want to soak that in and witness them in that moment too. It's impossible not to get chills when you hear the crowd, especially at a neutral site game, although that wasn't technically a neutral site game. That was very much a Montreal game. But even in a bigger space, reacting to these titans of the game, like Poulin, right?
That moment of Poulin was, I think everybody got chills.
And you're seeing it again now with this takeover tour, right? You're seeing these crowds recognize the talent that they're seeing. That's a game that you'll never forget. My first PWHL game was at Ball Arena, and I got to see these two teams battle it out, and this is what happened, right? You just collect all those memories. So for the most part, I do try to do that, and I find during breaks, sometimes that's when I'll just, like look around, I go, that's a great sign, and because you don't want to completely miss that, right? You don't want to completely miss it. I did see you though New Year's Eve, and I told you that was my first time going to a game as a fan.
Yeah.
Which I already knew was going to be great. I wasn't worried about that because you can feel that atmosphere, but it was great as a fan because then you get to sit in the crowd and you get to hear everybody talking about, oh, this person's really not really doing this well. And I'm like, this is what it's about. Like, yes, you're talking about hockey. You're talking about these athletes exactly the way that we would any other athlete, and that's where we're at. I love it.
Yeah, that was probably a good way for you to get some perspective, and I know you buy tickets and donate them, so I'll let people know that I promoting the game. I
only mention that because it is important to support this league, and I take that seriously. Yeah. So we went with a group of friends. It was really fun.
I was brave enough to approach Daniella, and she's been nothing but supportive of my little corner of this community. So I really, really appreciate it.
Because everything you do adds to the whole ecosystem, right? And I'm so glad, and I want you to feel valued because you are. And what you bring is important. And it's not just you, right? We see a number of people, whether they're with outlets or doing more independent stuff. Yes, amplify it. The more we can amplify it, the better.
So with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll just watch for the game on Saturday. Thank you so much, and it'll be a great event, and not to mention a great hockey game. So
yes.
We look forward to your great calls, as always. This has been, and I hope we get to do this again sometime. Yeah. We'll see if we can pick some spots, but just to do this in person has been wonderful. So thank you for joining us, Daniella, and we'll see you, at the rink or on the arena.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.